Hey everybody, and welcome back for our third week of virtual learning. I hope you all saw that our school has been pushed back to May 1st now. It was April 15th and now it is May 1st. So I'm missing you guys a lot, but I hope you're enjoying the instructional videos and the books that we've read so far. This week we are going to be reading How to Eat Fried Worms. We're going to be starting this novel study and we're going to be reading 10 chapters a week. So we're going to be reading chapters 1 through 10 this week. And before we begin, I'm going to review our vocabulary and talk about some assignments for this week. So we have 10 vocab words. Our first vocabulary word is casserole. A casserole is a dish baked and served in a deep pan. Our second vocabulary word is devious. When someone's devious, they're showing dishonesty and trickery to reach their goals. They are not honest. Our third vocabulary word is a fancy one. I really like this word. It's obsequiously. Obsequiously means you are too eager to help or obey. Think of a puppy that's really, really excited, and they're so excited that they can't even listen to what they're being told to do. Our fourth vocabulary word is limp. A limp means to walk with difficulty, usually because of an injury. Our fifth vocabulary word is fink. A fink is an unpleasant person who is strongly disliked. Our sixth vocabulary word is flourish. Flourish means to grow healthy. Think of a flower, flourish. They sound similar. Flowers grow, and to flourish means to grow healthy. Number 7, our seventh vocabulary word is daub. When you daub something, you put something on. You put on something like a cream with short, quick motion. So you daub. Our 8th vocabulary word is chaff. Chaff are leftover chopped bits of farm crops like hay, seeds, or corn husks. Our 9th vocabulary word is keel. To keel means to fall over. You might keel over from being sick or from laughing so hard. And our 10th vocabulary word is loll. To loll means to hang loosely and droop down. Your tongue might loll out of your mouth if you're joking around, or if someone's very sick or they have fainted or something like that. We have a few assignments this week. This week you have one mandatory classwork. It is How to Eat Fried Worms classwork. You can find it on Connect. It's going to be a Google form again, and it's going to be covering some things from How to Eat Fried Worms, but it's going to be covering our skill for this week. Our skill for this week is we're looking at the connections between sentences and paragraphs in a text. So those relationships like compare and contrast, cause and effect, sequence of events, those relationships that we've been talking about all year long. So this is a review strategy that we're doing this week. So that's what your classwork is going to be over. You have a mandatory, so that was classwork that's mandatory. That means you have to do it. It is for a grade. You also have 2 other classwork assignments, but those are optional. If you do them, you will get a grade. If you don't do them, you'll just be excluded. For homework this week, we've got 2 past iReady reading lessons. I see a lot of you guys getting even more than 2, and that is awesome. Really, really good practice. And our weekly assessment, or our test, are the How to Eat Fried Worms comprehension questions that are on Connect. It's another Google form, and yes, you can use your book if you've got a physical copy. You can use the electronic copy that I post on Connect, or you can listen to the video while you answer the questions. It's only questions from chapters 1 through 10. I'm also going to be providing you with a writing assignment. If you would like to do that, it is not mandatory. Make sure to check out Connect, because that's where all of our weekly information is going to be. I hope you're all healthy and safe, and we're going to go ahead and jump in to How to Eat Fried Worms by Thomas Rockwell. Now again, this is a little bit of an older book, not as old as The Chocolate Touch. This was written in the 70s, but we do see some words that maybe we don't use so much anymore. But this is considered a classic novel. Chapter 1. The bet. Hey, Tom, where were you last night? Yeah, you missed it. Alan and Billy came up the front walk. Tom was sitting on his porch steps, bouncing a tennis ball. Old man Tater caught Joe as we were climbing through the fence, so we all had to go back, and he made us pile the peaches on his kitchen table, and then he called our mothers. Joe's mother hasn't let him out yet. Where were you? Tom stopped bouncing the tennis ball. He was a tall, skinny boy who took his troubles very seriously. My mother kept me in. What for? I wouldn't eat my dinner. Alan sat down on the step below Tom and began to chew his thumbnail. What was it? Salmon casserole. Billy flopped down on the grass, chunky, snub-nosed, freckled. Salmon casserole's not so bad. Wouldn't she let you just eat 2 bites? Asked Alan. Sometimes my mother says, well, all right, if I'll just eat 2 bites. I wouldn't even eat 1. That's stupid, said Billy. 1 bite can't hurt you. I'd eat 1 bite of anything before I'd let them send me up to my room right after supper. Tom shrugged. How about mud? Alan asked Billy. You wouldn't eat a bite of mud. Alan argued a lot, small, knobby-kneed, nervous, gnawing at his thumbnail, his face smudged, his red hair mussed, shirt tail hanging out, shoelaces untied. Sure I would, Billy said. Mud. What's mud? Just dirt with a little water in it. My father says everyone eats a pound of dirt every year anyway. What about poison? That's different. Billy rolled over on his back. Is your mother going to make you eat the leftovers today at lunch? He asked Tom. She never has before. How about worms? Alan asked Billy. Tom's sister's cat squirmed out from under the porch and rubbed against Billy's knee. Sure, said Billy. Why not? Worms are just dirt. Yeah, but they bleed. So you'd have to cook them. Cows bleed. I bet $100 you wouldn't really eat a worm. You talk big now, but you wouldn't if you were sitting at the dinner table with a worm on your plate. I bet I would. I'd eat 15 worms if somebody bet me $100. You really want to bet? I'll bet you $50 you can't eat 15 worms. I really will. Where are you going to get $50? In my savings account. I've got $130.79 in my savings account. I know, because last week I put in the $5 my grandmother gave me for my birthday. Your mother wouldn't let you take it out. She would if I lost the bet. She'd have to. I'd tell her I was going to sell my stamp collection otherwise. And I bought that with all my own money that I earned mowing lawns, so I can do whatever I want with it. I'll bet you $50 you can't eat 15 worms. Come on, you're chicken. You know you can't do it. I wouldn't do it, said Tom. If salmon casserole makes me sick, think what 15 worms could do. Joe came scuffing up the walk and flopped down beside Billy. He was a small boy with dark hair and a long nose and big brown eyes. What's going on? Come on, said Alan to Billy. Tom can be your second and Joe'll be mine, just like in a duel. You think it's so easy? Here's your chance to make $50. Billy dangled a leaf in front of the cat, but the cat just rubbed against his knee, purring. What kind of worms? Regular worms. Not those big green ones that get on the tomatoes. I won't eat those. And I won't eat them all at once. It might make me sick. 1 worm a day for 15 days. And he can eat them any way he wants, said Tom. Boiled, stewed, fried, fricasseed. Yeah, but we provide the worms, said Joe. And there have to be witnesses present when he eats them. Either me or Alan or somebody we can trust. Not just you and Billy. Okay, Alan said to Billy. Billy scratched the cat's ears. $50. That was a lot of money. How bad could a worm taste? He'd eaten fried liver, salmon loaf, mushrooms, tongue, pig's feet. Other kids' parents were always nagging them to eat. His had begun to worry about how much he ate. Not that he was fat. He just hadn't worked off all his winter blubber yet. He slid his hand into his shirt and furtively squeezed the side of his stomach. Worms were just dirt. Dirt wasn't fattening. If he won $50, he could buy that mini bike George Cunningham's brother had promised to sell him in September before he went away to college. Heck, he could gag anything down for $50, couldn't he? He looked up. I can use ketchup or mustard or anything like that, as much as I want. Alan nodded. Okay. Billy stood up. Okay. Chapter 2. Digging. No, said Tom. That's not fair. He and Alan and Joe were wandering around behind the barns at Billy's house, arguing over where to dig the first worm. What do you mean it's not fair? Said Joe. Nobody said anything about where the worms were supposed to come from. We can get them anywhere we want. Not from a manure pile, said Tom. That's not fair. Even if we didn't make a rule about something, you still have to be fair. What difference does it make where the worm comes from? Said Alan. A worm's a worm. There's nothing wrong with manure, said Joe. It comes from cows, just like milk. Joe was sly, devious, a schemer. The manure pile had been his idea. You and Billy have got to be fair, too, said Alan to Tom. Besides, we'll dig in the old part of the pile, where it doesn't smell much anymore. Come on, said Tom, starting off across the field, dragging his shovel. If it was fair, you wouldn't be so anxious about it. Would you eat a worm from a manure pile? Joe and Alan ran to catch up. I wouldn't eat a worm, period, said Joe. So you can't go by that. Yeah, but if your mother told you to go out and pick some daisies for the supper table, would you pick the daisies off a manure pile? My mother wouldn't ask me. She'd ask my sister. You know what I mean. Alan and Tom and Joe leaned on their shovels under a tree in the apple orchard, watching the worms they had dug squirming on a flat rock. Not him, said Tom, pointing to a night crawler. Why not? Look at him. He'd choke a dog. Jeez, exploded Alan. You expect us to pick one Billy can just gulp down, like an ant or a nit? Gulping's not eating, said Joe. The worm's got to be big enough so Billy has to cut it into bites and eat it with a fork, off a plate. It's this one or nothing, said Alan, picking up the nightcrawler. Tom considered the matter. It would be more fun watching Billy trying to eat the nightcrawler. He grinned. Boy, it was huge. A regular python. Wait till Billy saw it. We let you choose where to dig, said Alan. After all, thought Tom, Billy couldn't expect to win $50 by just gulping down a few measly little baby worms. All right, come on. He turned and started back toward the barns, dragging his shovel. Chapter 3. Training Camp. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Billy was doing push-ups in the deserted horse barn. He wasn't worried about eating the first worm, but people were always daring him to do things, and he found it was better to look ahead, to try to figure things out, get himself ready. Last winter, Alan had dared him to sleep out all night in the igloo they'd built in Tom's backyard. Why not? Billy had thought to himself. What could happen? About midnight, huddled, shivering under his blankets in the darkness, he'd begun to wonder if he should give up and go home. His feet felt like aching stones in his boots. Even his tongue inside his mouth was cold. But half an hour later, as he was stubbornly dancing about outside in the moonlight to warm himself, Tom's dog Martha had come along with 6 other dogs, all in a pack, and Billy had coaxed them into the igloo and blocked the door with an orange crate. And after the dogs had stopped wrestling and nipping and barking and sniffing around, they'd all gone to sleep in a heap with Billy in the middle, as warm as an onion in a stew. But he hadn't been able to think of anything special to do to prepare himself for eating a worm, so he was just limbering up in general. Push-ups, knee bends, jumping jacks, red-faced, perspiring. Nearby, on an orange crate, he'd set out bottles of ketchup and Worcestershire sauce, jars of piccalilli and mustard, a box of crackers, salt and pepper shakers, a lemon, a slice of cheese, his mother's tin cinnamon and sugar shaker, a box of Kleenex, a jar of maraschino cherries, some horseradish, and a plastic honey bear. Tom's head appeared around the door. "Ready?" Billy scrambled up, brushing back his hair. "Yeah." "Ta-ra!" Tom flung the door open. Alan marched in, carrying a covered silver platter in both hands, Joe slouching along beside him with a napkin over one arm, nodding and smiling obsequiously. Tom dragged another orange crate over beside the first. Alan set the silver platter on it. "A chair," cried Alan. "A chair for the monsieur." "Come on," said Billy. "Cut the clowning." Tom found an old milking stool in one of the horse stalls. Joe dusted it off with his napkin, showing his teeth, and then ushered Billy onto it. "Ladies and gentlemen," shouted Alan, "I present my masterpiece, Worm à la mode." He swept the cover off the platter. "Ugh!" cried Billy, recoiling. Chapter 4, The First Worm. The huge nightcrawler sprawled limply in the center of the platter, brown and steaming. "Boiled," said Tom. "We boiled it." Billy stormed about the barn, kicking barrels and posts, arguing. "A nightcrawler isn't a worm. If it was a worm, it'd be called a worm. A nightcrawler's a nightcrawler." Finally, Joe ran off to get his father's dictionary. Nightcrawler. Noun. Earthworm. A large earthworm found on the soil surface at night. Billy kicked a barrel. It still wasn't fair. He didn't care what any dictionary said. Everybody knew the difference between a nightcrawler and a worm. Look at the thing. Ugh! It was as big as a souvenir pencil from the Empire State Building. Yuck! He poked it with his finger. Alan said they'd agreed right at the start that he and Joe could choose the worms. If Billy was going to cheat, the bet was off. He got up and started for the door. He guessed he had other things to do besides argue all day with a fink. So Tom took Billy aside into a horse stall and put his arm around Billy's shoulders and talked to him about George Cunningham's brother's mini bike and how they could ride it on the trail under the power lines behind Odell's farm, up and down the hills, bounding over rocks, rum, rum. Sure, it was a big worm, but it'd only be a couple more bites. Did he want to lose a mini bike over 2 bites? Slop enough mustard and ketchup and horseradish on it, and he wouldn't even taste it. "Yeah," said Billy, "I could probably eat this one, but I gotta eat 15. "You can't quit now," said Tom. "Look at them." He nodded at Alan and Joe, waiting beside the orange crates. "They'll tell everybody you were chicken. It'll be all over school. Come on." He led Billy back to the orange crates, sat him down, tied the napkin around his neck. Alan flourished the knife and fork. "Would monsieur like it carved, lengthwise, or crosswise?" I like his accent. "Ketchup?" asked Joe, showing his teeth. "Cut it out," said Tom. "Here." He globbed ketchup and mustard and horseradish on the nightcrawler, squeezed a few drops of lemon juice, and salted and peppered it. Billy closed his eyes and opened his mouth. "Oh, what in?" Tom sliced off the end of the nightcrawler and forked it up. But just as he was about to poke it into Billy's open mouth, Billy closed his mouth and opened his eyes. "No, let me do it." Tom handed him the fork. Billy gazed at the dripping ketchup and mustard, thinking, "Ugh! It's all right talking about eating worms, but doing it?" Tom whispered in his ear, "Mini bike." Ugh. Billy poked the fork into his mouth, chewed furiously, gulped, gulped. His eyes crossed, swam, squinched shut. He flapped his arms wildly, and then, opening his eyes, he grinned beatifically up at Tom. "Superb, Gaston." Tom cut another piece, ketchuped, mustarded, salted, peppered, horseradished, and lemoned it, and handed the fork to Billy. Billy slugged it down, smacking his lips, and so they proceeded, now sprinkling on cinnamon and sugar, or a bit of cheese, some cracker crumbs, or Worcestershire sauce, until there was nothing on the plate but a few stray dabs of ketchup and mustard. "Well," said Billy, standing up and wiping his mouth with his napkin, "so we are done with the first course. Now, seconds?" "Let me look in your mouth," said Alan. "Yeah," said Joe. "See if he swallowed it all." "Certainly, certainly," said Billy. "Look as long as you want." Alan and Joe scrutinized the inside of his mouth. Okay, said Tom. "Leave him alone now. Come on. 1 down, 14 to go." "How'd it taste?" asked Alan. "Good, good," said Billy. "Very fine, very fine. Hoo-hoo." He flapped his arms like a big bird and began to hop around the barn, crying, "Good, good, very fine, good, good." Alan and Joe and Tom looked worried. Yeah, good. "How are you feeling, Billy?" Tom asked. "Yeah, stop flapping around and come tell us how you're feeling," said Joe. They huddled together by the orange crates as Billy hopped around and around them, flapping his arms. Good, very fine, hoo-hoo." Alan whispered, "He's crackers." Joe edged towards the door. "Don't let him see we're afraid. Crazy people are like dogs. If they see you're afraid, they'll attack." "It couldn't be," whispered Tom, standing his ground. "One worm?" Goot, screeched Billy, hopping higher and higher and drooling from the mouth. "Come on," whispered Joe to Tom. "Hey, Billy!" burst out Tom suddenly in a hearty, quavering voice. "Cut it out, will you? I want to ask you something." Billy's arms flapped slower. He tiptoed menacingly around Tom, his head cocked to one side, his cheeks puffed out. Tom hugged himself, chuckling nervously. "Cut it out, will you, Billy?" Billy pounced. Joe and Alan fled, the barn door banging behind them. Billy rolled on the floor, helpless with laughter. Tom clambered up, brushing himself off. "Did you see their faces?" Billy said, laughing. "Climbing over each other out the door? Oh, geez." Joe was pale as an onion. "Yeah," said Tom. "You fooled them." "Oh, geez." Billy sat up. Then he crawled over to the door and peered out through a knothole. "Look at them peeking up over the stone wall. Watch this." The door swung slowly open. Screeching, Billy hopped onto the door sill. Into the yard, up onto a stump, splash into a puddle, flapping his arms, rolling his head. Alan and Joe galloped up the hill through the high grass, yelling, "Here he comes! Get out of the way!" And then Billy stopped hopping and, climbing up on the stump, called in a shrill, girlish voice, "Oh, boys, where are you going? It's something tear you ittle boys." Alan and Joe stopped and looked back. "It oo doing home, ittle boys," yelled Billy. "It oo teared." "Who's scared, you lunk?" called Alan. "Yeah," yelled Joe. "I guess I can go home without being called scared if I want to." "But ain't oo in a dawful hurry," shouted Billy. "I just remembered I was supposed to help my mother wash windows this afternoon," said Alan. "That's all." He turned and started up through the meadow, his hands in his pockets. "Yeah," said Joe. "Me too." He trudged after Alan. Oh, Billy. Chapter 5, The Gathering Storm. Alan and Joe stopped in the orchard by the pile of fresh dirt. "You think he'll be able to do it?" asked Alan, biting his thumbnail. I don't know, said Joe. He can't do it, said Alan. How could anybody eat 15 worms? My father'll kill me. $50? He ate that one awful easy. Forget it, said Joe. If he doesn't give up himself, I'll figure something out. We could spike the next worm with pepper. He'd eat one piece and then another, talking to Tom. Then all of a sudden he'd sneeze. Ka-choom! Then he'd sneeze again. Ka-choom! Then again. Ka-choom! Ka-choom! A faint look of panic would creep over his face. He's beginning to wonder if he'll ever stop. He clutches his stomach. His eyes begin to water. Ka-choom! Ka-choom! Billy's awful stubborn, said Alan. Even if it was killing him, he might not give up. Ka-choom! Ka-choom! Cried Joe. He falls to the floor. I bend over him. God, I say, call his mother. It's the troglodicrosis. His eyes bleed up at me. Ka-choom! Remember that business last summer, said Alan, gnawing on his thumbnail, when it was 95 degrees in the shade and I dared him to put on all his winter clothes and his father's raccoon coat and his ski boots and walk up and down Main Street all afternoon? Ka-choom! Ka-choom! They went off through the orchard, Joe sneezing, sighing, rolling his eyes, pretending to be Billy suffering from a dose of peppered worm. Alan moaning to himself about how stubborn Billy could be. $50? Chapter 6, The Second Worm. Billy sighed. On the plate before him lay the last bite of worm under a daub of ketchup and mustard. What's the matter? Asked Tom. I don't know, sighed Billy. He picked up the fork again. Does it taste bad? No, said Billy wearily. I just taste ketchup and mustard mostly, but it makes me feel sort of sick, even before I eat it, just thinking about it. He sighed again and then glanced at Joe and Alan, talking to each other in whispers over by the window. What are you whispering about? Nothing. Then what are you whispering for? Nothing. It's not important. Just something Joe's father told him last night. What? Come on, finish up. It was nothing. We'll miss the cartoons. Billy shut his eyes and popped the last piece of worm into his mouth, chewed, gagged, clapped his hands over his mouth. No, no. Toppled backward off the orange crate. Sprawling on his back in the chaff, he gazed peacefully up at the ceiling. Joe and Alan stood over him. Open up. Billy opened his mouth. Wider. See any, Joe? Nah, he swallowed it. Okay, let's go. Chapter 7. Red crash helmets and white jumpsuits. After the movies, Tom walked home with Billy. Tomorrow I'll roll the crawler in cornmeal and fry it, like a trout. It's not really the taste, said Billy. It's more the thought. When I start to eat it, even though it's smothered in ketchup and mustard and grated cheese, I can't stop thinking worm. Worm, 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 worm. Gaggles of worms in bait boxes. Drowned worms drying up on sidewalks. A worm squirming as the fish hook gores into him. The soggy end of a worm draggling out of a dead fish's mouth. Robins yanking worms out of a lawn. I can't stop thinking worm. Yeah, but if I fry in cornmeal, it won't look like a crawler, said Tom. I'll put parsley around it and some slices of lemon. And then you can concentrate. Think fish. All the time you're waiting in the barn, all the time you're eating it, keep saying to yourself, fish, 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 fish. Here I am eating fish, good fish. Trout, salmon, flounder, perch. I'll ride my mini bike into church. Dace, tuna, haddock, trout. Wait till you hear the minister shout. Fish, 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 fish. Shark, haddock, sucker, eel. I'll race my father in his automobile. Eel, flounder, bluegill, shark. We'll race all day till after dark. Billy cheered up. Think how they'd all stare. I'd rev up the aisle, zip around the front pews, down a side aisle under the stained glass windows. My parents would kill me. Reverend Yarder'd peer down over the Bible stand. "William," he'd cry. "William, you take that engine thing out of here this minute." "Yeah, and then they'd come chasing out after us," said Tom. Billy laughed, waving their arms and yelling, and we'd lead them zigzag round and in and out among the gravestones and monuments in the cemetery, and then roar off down the Sandgate Road, leaving them draped over tombs, panting and shaking their fists. "Hup, hup," yelled Tom, dancing around and boxing the air. And that Monday we'd smuggle it into class disguised as Raymond Dwelly because he's so fat, and hide it in the coat closet. And then when Millie Butler said anything at all, even something like, "Excuse me," or if she even sniffed, we'd dump a whole bottle of ink over her head and run for the coat closet, overturning chairs and desks behind us to slow up Mrs. Howard. She'd come after us, fuming and shouting threats, and suddenly the doors of the coat closet would slam open, and out we'd roar on our mini-bike in blood-red crash helmets and white jumpsuits, our scarves streaming out behind us. And we'd roar round and round the classroom while Mrs. Howard knelt among the overturned desks and chairs, sobbing helplessly into her hands. And then, rum, rum, out the door and up the hall, thumbing our noses at the monitors. Brackety, 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 up the stairs, stiff-arming tacklers into Mr. Simmons' office, up onto his desk. Broom, broom, a backfire into his face, and zoom! Out the window as he topples backward in his chair in a hurricane of quiz papers and report cards. And then, crunch, landing on the driveway, we roar off down the highway to Bennington and join the Navy, so Mrs. Howard and Mr. Simmons and our parents can't punish us. Chapter 8, The Third Worm. Tom ran out of the kitchen of Billy's house, holding the sizzling frying pan out in front of him with both hands, the screen door banging behind him. Alan threw open the barn door when he saw him coming. Tom thumped the frying pan down on the orange crate. "There," he said breathlessly. "Done to a T. Look at her, all golden brown and sizzling. It looks good enough to eat." "Yeah," said Billy. He poked the worm with his fork. Tom took off the potholder glove he was wearing. "Think fish," he said. "Remember, think fish. Trout, salmon, flounder, perch. I'll ride my mini-bike in church. Eel, salmon, bluegill, trout. Wait till you hear the minister shout. Clam, flounder, tuna, sucker. Look out, here we come, old Miss Tucker. Lobster, black bass, oyster stew. There goes New Orleans. Here comes Peru." He leaned over Billy and whispered in his ear, "Fish, fish, 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 fish. Go on, take a bite. Fish, 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 okay? Second bite. Fish, fish, fish." It's a pretty good friend, I think. Chapter 9, The Plotters. "Geez, you think it'll work?" said Alan to Joe. "Suppose it doesn't. He didn't seem to pay much attention today." "Don't worry," said Joe. "We got him thinking. It takes time. I got it all doped out. Trust me." Chapter 10, The Fourth Worm. Billy ate steadily, grimacing, rubbing his nose, spreading on more horseradish sauce. Tom bent over him, hissing in his ear, "Fish, fish, 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 fish." Billy paused, watching Alan and Joe whispering by the door. He swished the last bite round and round in the ketchup and mustard. All of a sudden he said, "That's not fair. They can't act like that anymore. Every time I swallow, they lean forward as if they expected me to keel over or something. And then when I don't, they look surprised and shrug their shoulders and nudge each other." "Come on," said Joe. "Cut it out. We can watch you, for cripe's sake. We're just standing over here by the window, watching you." "No, you're not," said Billy. "You're whispering, and acting as if you expected something to happen every time I swallow." It's nothing, said Joe. Forget it. Look, we'll turn around and look out the window while you swallow. What do you mean it's nothing, said Billy. What's nothing? Oh, come on, said Alan. It's just something Joe's father told him the other night. It's nothing. What? What? It'll just worry you, said Alan. It's crazy. It's nothing. Forget it. Billy tore the napkin away from his throat. Tell me! It's nothing, said Joe. You know how my father is. He's always yelling about something. Tell me or it's all off. Well, look, it's nothing, but the night before last I was telling Janie about you eating the worms, and my father was on the porch and heard us. So he threw down his newspaper and says, Joseph! So I says, Yes, Pa? And he says, Have you ate a worm, Joseph? And then he grabbed my shoulders and shook me till my hands danced at the end of my arms like a puppet's. It's for your own good, he says. So I stuttered out, It's not going to do me any good if I shake to pieces, is it? Janie was wailing. My mother was chewing her apron in the doorway. Alfred, she cries, what's he done? You'll deracinate him. Has he hauled down the American flag at school and eaten it again? Has he... So what's the point? Yelled Billy. Get to the point. What's it all have to do with me? I'm coming to it, said Joe, wiping his nose. But I wanted to show you how important it was, my father nearly killing me and all. He sneezed, and then Alan began to sneeze, and finally had to hobble off into one of the horse stalls, hugging his stomach to recover. Anyway, said Joe, wiping his nose again and hitching up his Levi's. So my father told my mother he thought I'd eaten a worm. A what? Says my mother, dropping her apron and clutching the sides of her head. A worm, says my father, nodding solemnly. So my mother fainted, collapsed, all helter-skelter right there in the doorway, and lay still, her tongue lolling out of her mouth, her red hair spread out beautifully over the doorsill. So Will you cut it out? Billy yelled. Who cares about your mother? What does that have to do with me? I think he's lying, said Tom. Who ever heard of someone's mother fainting and her tongue hanging out? All right, yelled Joe, stamping around. All right, now I won't tell. You can die, Billy Forrester, and you'll have to carry him home, Tom Grount. All by yourself. Nobody says to me who cares about your mother? All right, I'm going. Alan, he yelled, they're insulting my mother. I'm going. Don't, said Alan, running out of the horse stall and grabbing Joe by the shirt tail. Don't. You gotta tell him. Even your mother'd say so. Mine too, no matter what he said. Ain't it a matter of life and death? I won't, said Joe, starting toward the door. Alan pulled him back. You got to. How long have we known poor Bill? 6, 7 years? For old time's sake, Joe, because we were all once in kindergarten together. Think of the agony he'll face, Joe. The pain and the blood and the gore. Hey, quit. Rover's at my feet. The pain and the blood and the gore. Billy was on his knees by the orange crate, wringing his hands, not daring to interfere. But when Joe glanced sullenly back at him, he whispered, Please, Joe, for old time's sake. Well, will you apologize for insulting my mother? I do, said Billy. I do. I apologize. So Alan and Joe began to sneeze again, and this time had to bend over and put their heads between their legs to recover. Tom, who had been watching them suspiciously, trying to make out what was going on, started to say something. Shut up, hissed Billy fiercely, turning on him. You keep out of it. So Joe went on with his story, how his mother had been carried upstairs to her room, how the doctor had come, shaking his head, how his aunt had sobbed, pulling down all the shades in their house, how that morning his mother had finally come downstairs, for the first time leaning on his aunt's arm, pale and sorrowful. How... Yeah, said Tom. Sure. So why? What does eating worms do to you? Nobody will tell me, said Joe, opening his eyes wide. It's been 3 days now, and nobody'll say. It's just like the time my older cousin Lucy got caught in the back seat of her father's Chevrolet with the encyclopedia salesman. Nobody'll tell me why there was such an uproar. He wiped his mouth. But one thing's sure, it's worse than poison. Probably... Crap, said Tom. Oh, yeah? Said Joe. But then he and Alan had another sneezing fit, sprawling helplessly against each other. Look at them, said Tom to Billy. They're not sneezing, they're laughing. Come on, eat the last piece and let's get out of here. You really think so? Said Billy doubtfully. The sneezing did look an awful lot like giggling. Sure, look at them. Tom gave Alan and Joe a shove. They collapsed in a heap, sneezing uncontrollably. Billy watched them. Yeah, sure. They weren't sneezing. They were laughing. Weren't they? Hay fever, gasped Alan. Hay fever. Aw, you never had hay fever before, said Tom. How about yesterday or the day before? Come on, Billy, open up. So Billy, half believing Tom and half not, glancing doubtfully at Alan and Joe, allowed Tom to poke the last bite of worm into his mouth and lead him out of the barn. Alan and Joe sat up. It didn't work, said Alan. Joe began to brush the chaff out of his hair. You wait. He wasn't sure. Tom was, but he isn't eating the worms. You wait. Billy's worried. He was before. That's why he said he felt like he was going to throw up. But now he's really worried. Suppose I wasn't lying. Did you see his face when I said my father shook me? I thought his eyes would bug right out of his head. Alan laughed. Oh, geez, yeah. And when you said your mother fainted? Joe stopped brushing the chaff out of his hair. Except, why'd you laugh so much, for cripe's sake? If you'd kept a straight face, even Tom wouldn't have guessed. Aw, you laughed first. What do you mean? Me? I laughed first? I did not. You did so. You laughed when he yelled at you the first time. You wiped your nose. They went off through the meadow, arguing. And that is it for this week. So these are pretty short chapters. Some of them are less than a page long. I have put the entire PDF of the book on Connect. If you want to go ahead and read the whole thing, you are more than welcome to. I think there are exactly 40 chapters. It is a really funny book. I hate worms. I've told you guys that, but this book just makes it too funny. Remember, if you have any questions, if you want to do a one-on-one Zoom session with me to talk about any assignments, send me a message on Dojo. I hope to see all of you soon in one of my Zoom sessions, and I hope you're staying safe and healthy. I'll see you soon.